Since you all know the kind of engineer I am, class is dismissed. Let me stand on all the protocols established thus far. You know, when Thabo Mbeki, the former president of South Africa, became president, somebody asked him, "Can you step in Mandela's shoes?" And he says, "No." He says, "Why?" He says, "Mandela's shoes are big and ugly." So the protocol you guys have established is big and ugly. I'm not going to step in. But you know, I'm going to talk about a topic that I'm so passionate about. You know, when I went to college in '91, there was a kid called Darrell Simmons. It took Darrell 8 years to get a degree that everybody got in 4 years. And he went off and worked for Aircrafts and became a manager of their design center. And anytime I meet my classmate, we still joke that when I'm walking into the plane, I'm thinking this Cummins engine was designed by Darrell Simmons. But he wanted to be an engineer. And he said, "I'm not as good in calculus as everybody else, but I'm going to persist until I become an engineer." So I want us to develop an educational system where a young kid can say, "I want to be an engineer," and it is possible. Today, it's not. You know, when I was growing up not too far from here, the planes would pass over our home and then drop somewhere at the airport. And then I'll tell myself, I want to fly in one of these, but I want to become an astronaut. Many years later, I came so close to being an astronaut. Can we build an educational system where somebody can dream what they want to do and do it? The Pro-Vice Chancellor of Legon told you guys, he wanted to be an engineer. Then he wanted to be a medical doctor. Then he ended up being a biochemist. And I always tell him one day he's going to win the Nobel Prize. So life can take you on journeys, but there is nothing better than the kid saying, "I want to be something," and being able to be that thing. But our educational system, the way it's set up now, doesn't enable that. It's almost like gotcha. So we go home, we make policies, we go home feeling very proud about how many people we have prevented from becoming what they want to be. So I'm going to tell you what should be different. So Dee just mentioned engineering. So if you look at the pot to my right, anybody that grew up in Africa have seen that. That was the fridge when we were growing up. From evaporative cooling, you could get cool water from this. Now the one to the right is a sexy version of it. Now we should be selling these in the market. There should be a kid here at Academic City that says, "I want to do ceramics and I want to build these pots and I want them in every home." Then you don't have to worry about climate change, freon destroying the ozone layer, on and on. This we've had for thousands and thousands of years. But we are made to believe that anything that we build with our hands is not good enough. So it's going to come back from Europe with a pipe, a faucet in front of it, and that is sexy. But it started from here, okay? So what do I want you guys to take away? I know you are tired, so I want to put my takeaways in front so that if you don't hear anything after this. So we are overregulated. We must not sacrifice pragmatism for regulatory diligence and sometimes overreach. Okay. We must preserve academic standards, but we need to widen access. And I'll touch on all this, but just take note of this. You can take a snapshot. We must properly harness traditional technologies and or upgrade them with the times. We must indigenize the engineering classroom. We must humanize engineering education by integrating psychology, sociology, history, art, and sustainability into core graduation requirements. And we must celebrate our role models. Our role models should not be politicians. You know, they are seasonal. But we are here. So if you say Fred McBagonluri is my hero, 4 years from now, I'll still be here. The rest will be gone. So, look at this beautiful painting. 18th century, if your leg was bad, you get bullies from the neighborhood. They'll show up with muscles, hold you down, and without anesthesia, the doctor will just hack your leg with a saw. That is then. To my right, you see modern surgery. We're taking into consideration infection. It's a control room. Doctors are masked. Equipments are sterilized. And you get a nice, good treatment. From here, you go to post-acute care, and then you go through therapy, physical therapy, and then you get well. Now, our educational system still says you should go back, if you want to become a doctor, you should go back and do this first before you can do that. And why am I saying that? When I came back and we were starting the engineering program at Ashesi, I kept being told, if you guys don't do technical drawing and engineering drawing, we're not going to approve your engineering program. And I'm sitting down there saying, when I went to college in 91, I did technical drawing. The following year, that whole room was cleared out of those tables and rulers and calipers, think about it, and we had AutoCAD 10. Now, 25 years later, I'm being told that students in Ghana still have to do technical drawing. And then I said, why? He said, well, when you are in the field and you have to sketch something, you don't have computers there. I said, but you have iPads. You can still sketch on an iPad. What is the problem? So essentially, I was being told for you to be an engineer in Ghana, you have to go back to how the practice was done in the 18th century before you come to modern times. So that is something that needs to change. The other interesting thing in Ghana is that you are supposed to teach only in the field in which you have a PhD. Think about it. So if I have a PhD in physics and decide that I'm interested in psychology, you can't teach psychology. If I'm interested in statistics, yeah, maybe close enough, I'll be allowed to teach statistics. But any publication from statistics cannot be used towards my promotion. Did you hear that? That's like the craziest thing I've ever heard. Because knowledge only advances when you have new immigrants. So if you see statistics in psychology, there's a mathematician who is interested in psychology and has gone in there to create mathematical models to analyze psychological data. So immigrants into new fields make a difference. I met this lady when I was doing my PhD work at Princeton. Her undergraduate is in physical chemistry. She became the dean of engineering at Princeton. Then she went off to, University of California, and then she changed her research area to biomolecular engineering. Now she's back in Princeton doing energy, leading their energy center. So knowledge is not as discrete as we try to make it be. You can always go into a new field and make new contributions, because when people get stuck in their ways for too long, they don't have new perspectives. Only a foreigner can help. If you don't believe it, the United States is so strong and powerful because of immigration. In Korea, people are dying of old age and they don't have young adults. Japan is the same. Italy is the same. If you don't have immigrants, you are going to perish. It's just a matter of time. And it doesn't matter if they are blue or brown. So this is another lady, Jennifer Whidden. Her undergraduate is in music. Right there in red. Music. But there is life after death. Otherwise, what are all these Christians doing here? She moves from music to computer science, to a PhD in computer science, and she headed a department that was both computer science and electrical engineering. That is mobility. That is being given an opportunity to live your fullest potential. Here is this cute lady. She founded the whole field of geometric analysis. Her undergraduate was in physics. Okay, right there, physics. And she got a PhD in mathematics. So knowledge is not just a series of events. It's a continuum. And you should be able to learn. The smartest people move around quite well. I did undergrad in manufacturing engineering, my master's in engineering mechanics, my PhD in materials engineering. I was just looking for knowledge. I was just seeking knowledge. How do you aggregate all this to become a product developer? Okay, here's an interesting one. This guy had a PhD both in computer science and in music and dance. He really had good fun in college. He was uninhibited. He was uninhibited. He said bachelor's and master's, both in computer science and in classical singing from Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. That is how knowledge is supposed to be. You should acquire it, and you should be excited acquiring it. You should know you are doing something that you are really enthusiastic about. Well, he went to Harvard, and he teaches economics. In essence, he's an intellectual immigrant, right? He's bringing computer science, music, and dance, and then you will ask, what has music got to do with economics? Right? But if you can find synergies between the two, you could be a Nobel laureate. Okay. Vladimir. I know this guy personally. His wife was my classmate at MIT. He did not even have an undergraduate degree. He dropped out because he wasn't attending classes and he was failing academically. Then somebody encouraged him he didn't even apply. Some professor called David Kasdan, called him, admitted him to Harvard, and he got a PhD. No undergrad, no master's, PhD. Can that happen here? The last time I showed this slide was at a retreat for GTech. And the board chair at the time said, this cannot happen here. And I said, why? And he said, we don't have geniuses if we have very few. So I said, what do you do with the few you have? Here's another guy. If you study psychology, Erik Erikson is everywhere in every psychology book. He had the equivalent of a high school diploma. And look at all the schools he taught: Berkeley, Harvard. So we are talking about degrees, and the world is talking about knowledge. We're talking about degrees. We measure intelligence based on how many degrees somebody has. But the world of development and advancement is what you can do with what you have. So the problem we have is that if you want to go into engineering in Ghana, you are expected to have mathematics, physics, and chemistry. And there's an additional mathematics. If you ask me, I still don't know what that is. But when I explain it to people, I said, it looks like pre-calculus. And you are told you must have that to get into an engineering program. Now, over the years, I've realized that because engineering programs are oversubscribed in our universities, they use that requirement as a filter. Listen to that properly. For me, that is treason. They use additional mathematics to prevent kids from getting in because they have too many of them. So you need to have additional mathematics. I'm saying you don't need it because the first 2 years of engineering is mathematics. So why should we hold the gate and prevent the kids from getting in? Now, biology is another one. We don't count biology as part of the requirements to get into engineering. But here's the irony of it. I was a biology student. I went to St. Augustine's College to go to medical school because I was told the only way you can prove to the world you were smart in Ghana was to go to med school. I was just going to med school like for no reason than to prove to the world that I was sharp. Then I got a scholarship, filled in the forms, and I checked the box called pre-med. And then I ran up the stairs at Scholarship Secretariat those days. That's where your Parliament House is now. It's like 11th floor. Then I said, I've finished my form. The guy looks through it and said, oh, pre-med, what is that? I said, medical school. He said, no. This scholarship is for engineers. Weren't you told? I said, no. He said, okay, do you still want to go? And I'm standing there like, yes. Biology. Now, if I had stayed in Ghana and finished sixth form with biology, I would never be an engineer. Vous comprenez? I will not be an engineer. But if you look at the development in engineering as a field, biomedical is trending. In fact, biomedical, in my opinion, is as important as AI and robotics. Because we want to live, we have the desire to live to be 100. Although some of us want to check out at 60. We want to live long. And so we have to engineer that existence. We have to come up with technologies that will enable us to live longer. You swallow a pill for your diabetes that will know exactly when to release insulin. Your heart, the clocks, the plaque, that kills a lot of people in this part of the world, will have a little robot cleaning it, like cleaning that gutter out, scooping it out. So if you want to think about heart failure, think about the gutters in Accra. They are choked. That's exactly what happens before you get a stroke or a heart attack. So biomedical is important, and it should be an integral part of the process. So what you will see here, and I'm going to go to this. The good news is this is the new curriculum that the government is going to introduce for engineering. So on my left-hand side, which might be your right, the basic mathematics will be in there, social sciences and English, and those will be examined. And then you have PEP, which I believe is physical education and health. Robotics and coding will be taught but will not be examined. Okay? So the first group A is mandatory. Then group B, you have physics, chemistry, biology. I think you're supposed to pick 2 from this, Emmanuel, if I'm right. 2 from here. And then you can see the infamous additional math is now an elective. So while I was whining over this, the new curriculum is no longer going to make additional math mandatory. You get to pick other things, see? And that is where we need to go. But think about it. For almost 100 years, we prevented people from becoming engineers by putting additional math in there. Now, this has not been rolled out yet. So if you were to apply to an engineering program in Ghana today, additional mathematics is still a requirement. So here is what we are pushing at GTEC, and GTEC is the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission that I miraculously found myself on, because if you're not at the table, you are the decision. So I'm at the table now, and sometimes the lone voice. So we are proposing that you can keep the status quo, which is your direct entry, right? You can still come in with your English, core math, integrated science, and at least now we are requesting that you add biology and additional math. So the first line is what happens today. That's if you want to go into engineering, line number 1. So the next 3 are proposals, because each student comes with a unique set of background, right? So expand the science track. So keep your group A core, English, core math, integrated science. But in group B, you should be able to do physics and biology or chemistry and biology, right? Biology wasn't required previously. Then you also have folks that are coming from technical backgrounds, went through the vocational technical route. So they will do the core because they all do that. And at least, because they don't do core science, if they have any one of these, physics, chemistry, or biology, they should be able to get into an engineering program. And the last piece is what we don't even consider at all. So Tanko is here. His daughter goes to college with her high school transcript, right? Nobody is saying, where is your SAT? High school transcripts. And here you write high school, final national exam, and your transcripts don't really mean anything. So after 3-4 years hanging in high school, whether you were top of your class, at the bottom of your class, your whole destiny is defined around the outcome of WASI. I mean, on which planet does that make any sense? Why? So we are saying that those little immigrants running around, programming with startup companies, doing drones, doing Arduinos, the visual art students that can sketch cars more beautifully than mechanical engineers, there should be a pathway to get into engineering. Visual arts is engineering. When I used to run product development, in that group was somebody called an industrial designer. And as we are brainstorming what that product is, they are sketching. They are sketching. Now, you drive on the principal streets of Ghana, just drive across, and you see all these smokers, cookers lying by the roadside. And they work, but they are not sexy because it's not an engineered product. It's a welded product. An engineered product will look so nice, you want to have one in your house. So we've decided that engineering is on one side, visual arts is on the other side, and nothing really comes together like what happens in industry. Okay? So we are asking that if you don't do well in math or in physics or chemistry, you can also go into a pre-engineering program. When I went to college, we got tested for math and for English. If you didn't pass English, you go and take some composition classes, some grammar classes. If the math wasn't good, you started from algebra. Algebra 1, algebra 2, pre-calculus, and you can still be an engineer. I mean, if you listen to the panel discussion, people have different learning skills. It doesn't mean because they are slow, they are not intelligent. For heaven's sake, a tortoise lives to be 150 years, and yet it's very slow. But Usain Bolt can no longer run right now. So just because you are slow doesn't mean that you are not intelligent. So we need to make room for alternative pathways into engineering. Our Minister for Health went to the US with A-level in arts. She did A-level arts, and she went to do medicine. She's a medical doctor. She should be advocating for everybody else that if I did it, you can do it. I went to engineering with biology. And what happened? I spent all my career in biomedical and bio devices companies. So there was still biology in me somewhere that still wanted to manifest in other places. So how can you design products for human beings and then you don't understand the biology of humans? Okay? So this is all. But the last point I want to make here is if you even look at, so this is getting into the university, the barriers you have to cross to get into the university. I'll spend 5 minutes talking about the university itself. So when you go to college to study engineering, the main reason why is so that you can solve problems. That is what you hear all the time. We want to become problem solvers. And who are you solving those problems for? You're solving those problems for human beings, for humanity, right? So if you don't know how to define those problems, how to tease out those problems from those human beings, how are you going to develop a solution for them? How? You need to be able to talk to a customer, right? You need to be able to identify the problem that they have. You need to understand what a solution looks like for them. So there's a little bit of psychology. There's a little bit of understanding consumer behavior. And you are developing a solution within a social context. So a little bit of sociology. You have to be able to convince people to buy your product. So a little bit of marketing. But we teach engineering jacketed, like fluid mechanics, mechanics of materials. And we are very serious. We are carrying big books. And that is what makes us feel like it's such a complicated field. But you can spend all your career as an engineer selling new products, explaining new products to customers, how those products can be used to solve their problems. So I think we need to revamp how we get into engineering. And I think Dr. Elsie talked earlier about starting STEM at very early stages. Now I'm talking about flexibility. What you need to study. If you don't know history, if you don't know the history of the product or the problem, how are you going to develop a solution for it? You know, many years ago, I got an assignment, and the assignment was that in India, some really bad people were going through medical waste, harvesting used syringes and needles, wash them, well, not quite, repackage them, and sell. Waste from hospitals. 3 million people had hepatitis C, from contaminated needles and syringes. So the challenge was, how do you design the next syringe and needle so that it can only be used once? 1. 2, how do you design a syringe and needle to prevent health workers from getting pricked accidentally and getting infected, right? So these are real social issues that require engineering solutions. So you need to understand the technology. You need to understand the challenges, and then you design a solution. And when you design a solution, you have to test the solution. You have to actually do a focus group. So that was one. Another interesting project that I got that was quite interesting was, you know, there was a sustainability wave where companies were issuing sustainability statements. I mean, in Ghana, we say it was all hanya, because they soon found out that it was too expensive to implement sustainability. And nobody talks about sustainability anymore except in the university classrooms. But anyway, we were charged to look for alternate source of what? Plastic. Instead of hydrocarbon, could we come up with plastic from other sources to make syringes? Well, you're like, what are syringes? You know, this stuff that they inject you and throw it away. Well, that was a $7 billion industry. And those are not just simple devices, they are pumps. So we went and got some extracts of starch from corn and cassava. Think about this, engineers, so thinking engineering without thinking sociology. Then we made some syringes out of that. They looked very nice. And we went to a couple of doctors. The first one we met, we said, oh, look at this syringe. You know, the labeling, everything looked crispy, looked clean. But this is from what? We said starch. From what source? Corn and cassava. And then he dropped it on the table. He looked at us and he said, you are going to make syringes from corn and cassava? We said, yes. Do you know how many people's livelihood depend on corn and cassava? We just look at each other. He said, there are millions and millions of people in Latin America and in Africa whose main staple is cassava and corn. If you start extracting plastic from these, do you know where the prices will go? How many people will starve? I won't buy these syringes. We're looking at each other confused because these are things that, you learn on the job. Then we went back and we said, okay, we reported to headquarters, nobody is going to buy syringes made from starch because the world is going to starve. So this doctor is thinking about humanity, about people who are going to suffer because the world market prices for these products will go up. Then we said, okay, we are going to harvest all this polypropylene and reuse them to make syringes. Well, that was easy because we were already making syringes. But when we made the next syringes, they looked so cloudy because anytime you reuse polypropylene or polycarbonate, they change color. So you can't really see the markings properly. We took it to another set of doctors. And the guy goes, do you know the level of accuracy you need when you have to inject a cancer patient? I said, I can't see where 3 mil is, whether it's 2.5, 2.8, I can't see it. I don't want this. So we went back to what? Hydrocarbons. I'm just giving you this example to show that, you need to understand sustainability as an engineer. That's what we're trying to do. You need to understand psychology, right? Sociology. You need to understand the context of the product. Otherwise, you graduate first class, you can be the best A student, but if you don't understand the problems, you don't understand how to tease the problems from society, you will never be able to invent anything. We did not invent because we were exceptional. We invented because we could talk to people who actually have problems, and we went ahead to solve it for them. So on this note, thank you for your apt attention. Some of you were sleeping, but I can live with that. Thank you.